Welcome to another edition of the Hawk Off the Press podcast. I'm your host, Gazette Hawkeyes reporter John Steppe. I'm excited to welcome back to the podcast my Gazette Iowa State counterpart, Rob Gray. Rob, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, good to be with you, John.
And that's a sign that it's Cyhawk Week, which has obviously been a very interesting rivalry over the last few years. And it seems like this is maybe not a rivalry that gets a ton of national attention, but one that, one way or another, has oftentimes gone down to kind of one or two late possessions.
Yeah, indeed. And it certainly will get, I think, a good amount of attention this season with CBS showing up. I think it's the first time they've done an Iowa State game since 1971 with all the shakeups of the TV packages. And there aren't any juggernaut games at 2:30. You've got Notre Dame playing, I can't remember who. It should be an easy game for them. A few okay matchups, but nothing like this one. So to be this kind of featured game on one of the flagship networks should see a lot of eyeballs. I think they've drawn well in terms of, when they're on Fox and when they're on a featured spot. No offense to the Big Ten Network or FS1 or something like that, but should be fun. And again, it should be tense because they usually are. It's very rare. It's been since Campbell's first season that this game has been an utter blowout, and it's hard to imagine this game going in that direction.
Well, let's start out with the Iowa State offense versus the Iowa defense. I think that's probably the more interesting out of the two. I think both sides are going to be interesting, but I think that's probably the more interesting one. You just wrote today as we record this about it seems like an interesting kind of contrast in coordinators between Iowa State's young coordinator and, of course, the very veteran Phil Parker for Iowa's defense.
Yeah, well, much like Roco Beck made his second career start as quarterback against Iowa last season, and was okay at times, but had the costly pick six, which he to Sebastian Castro, that after the game said, "Hey, that's on me. It's overtime otherwise." And obviously, other plays happen. The complexion of the game changes, but that's the type of accountability you want out of a quarterback. So Mauser, 33 years old, turned 33 during spring camp. Phil Parker, long time defensive guru for Iowa. I mean, Mauser called him a quote unquote legend yesterday when talking about the challenge of facing Iowa's defense. And it is a challenge that Iowa State, I feel, has played into the hands of a lot in recent years. And I believe they're ready to play their way out of the hands of because of the weapons they have in the passing game. Jalen Knoll, Jaden Higgins, both 800 plus yard receiving guys last season. Higgins narrowly missing 1,000 yards, 13 touchdowns between them last year. Each had a touchdown last week. You know, and beyond that, though, you got tight end Ben Bramer. You've got transfers, Eli Green, Isaiah Alston. You got a speedster in Benny Nagoye that can make some plays, although he's only got 2 career catches. I think they're going to need that third or fourth option to emerge, and it's probably going to be a pass first type of game for them because they, really struggled to have any consistency on the ground last season. You've got 2 offensive linemen who missed the season opener, possible 1 returns, Matt Campbell said, but he's still a little bit thin up there against a defense that hangs its hat on stopping the run. So I think Iowa State's ready to pass to set up the run this season. Now we'll see. But with Mauser in there, he's not shy about trusting Roco Beck, and who of course grew tremendously as the season wore on last season. I think he has 12 touchdowns to 1 interception in his last 5 games. Trust him to find his top targets and find his third and fourth and fifth options too. So we'll see how that plays out. But obviously, Iowa tends to make offenses do what it wants the offenses to do. So we'll see what a chess match is like between the young Jedi and the Grandmaster, I guess.
Well, kind of good segue there with you mentioning Roco Beck and his improvement. Kind of where are the areas, for maybe an Iowa fan who hasn't watched a ton of Cyclone football since last year's Cyhawk game, where have you kind of seen the most growth for Roco kind of from week 2 of 2023 to week 2 of 2024?
I think the confidence he has in himself, which I don't think was ever small. I mean, you get to the Division I level and you do what you do in high school, et cetera. But the confidence he has in himself and the confidence he has gained from his teammates has grown tremendously. How do you trust a first-year quarterback, redshirt freshman, who'd never done much? Yeah, he played a little bit, uh, in a couple spots the previous season, in the first few games. And that's where Iowa State stubbornly again tried to run the ball every single game. He got away with it against UNI, didn't get away with it against Iowa, and didn't get away with it against in a catastrophic, in a sense, loss to Ohio, although they rebounded and went 6-3 in the Big 12. But that was a game Rocco Beck was. What Coach Campbell made a point to me to say that's kind of when you knew the toughness that Rocco Beck had. He was throwing up. He was really sick at halftime, and Coach Campbell told me he was ready. Okay, got to put in J.J. Cole. And then he saw Rocco Beck run out of the locker room, and he said, "Oh, okay, well that's a football player." Beck really has his coming out game in the big win at Oklahoma State the following week, and again down the stretch, it's extremely efficient and takes care of the football extremely well. And that's something obviously that will be required this week, but it's also an area where he just really became excellent last season. And, we'll see. Iowa scored a defensive touchdown each of their last two wins in this series, while winning 7 of the last 8. And certainly, obviously, defensive touchdown prior to that, too, and special teams plays and all that. But yeah, he's really earned the trust of all those guys, including Taylor Mauser, who watched him throw that 54-yard pass to Jalen Knoll, blanketed in double coverage, it turned out, and Knoll makes the play. But that's trusting each other and trusting that you know that connection is deep enough that even in what looks like maybe a bad decision or risk that you shouldn't take comes out in your favor.
And then with that Iowa State receiving core, it seems like Jays are good luck there with Jalen Knoll, Jaden Higgins. What do kind of each of them provide, and what challenges could that pose for Iowa's secondary?
Knoll is speed is very it's deceptive, um, and his route running is impeccable. Higgins is sort of the same, transfer from Eastern Kentucky, was really their biggest big play guy last season with 983 yards. Knoll had one more touchdown with 7 to his 6. But Higgins is a bigger target where Knoll is a shiftier target. And either one can go inside or outside. You can run them on short routes and where they get a lot of yards after the catch. You can run them deep and try to say, hey, go win in single coverage, or last week, double coverage. Different team, obviously, than that was defense, but the really dynamic group that combined for 1,800 plus yards receiving last season, I believe, right in that category. But again, they've got other options, and that's the key, because if Iowa does what it does, it will focus on them, make sure they've got enough guys to clean up the run game where they probably feel really good about their front seven, and obviously, for good reason. Somebody like an Eli Green, Ben Bramer, who was banged up last week, so limited, really flashed at times last season as a freshman tight end. Need big plays from him. Green, Isaiah Alston, the Army transfer, maybe Benny Nagoyi. Lots of options, as I've said, but a third and fourth option really have to step up for Iowa State to help out Rocco in that regard.
And then, depending on, we'll see how much they try to run the ball, but when they do, what does Sama kind of bring to this running game? Obviously, going up against a very veteran front seven for Iowa's defense.
Yeah, I mean, he's a true home run hitter, former track star. Saw his first carry, he hurdled a guy last week, 16 yards, did get banged up a little bit, only rushed it, I think, 5 times, but averaged 7.2 yards a carry. I believe it was just a cramp. There was no mention of him being out this week, so you feel good about him. But the way that line blocks, and again, against such a formidable front seven, you're going to have to settle for 1-yard gains for a while and see if he can hit a home run if you decide to lean on the run game, which is why I don't think they'll do it. I think when you can be both efficient and explosive in the passing game with Beck's accuracy, he overthrew a few guys even last week while going 20 to 26. I think that's the route to go. But again, Sama can be explosive. Showcasing the Kansas State snow game last year predominantly. But, Carson Hansen's a really good guy that's bulked up to be a good third down back. He ran a couple third and shorts last week, and they brought in Jalen Jackson, a really shifty changeup, 5'8" guy out of the MAC. So they've got options there, but it's been tough sledding. I mean, even the win, 10-7 win to 2022 with the drive, the 99-yard drive. Tyrell Brock went over 100 yards, barely, but he still didn't have a ton of success on the ground. And we saw what happened last season, the year before. So it's going to be really hard against that front seven, which is why I think they won't butt their head against the wall. They'll say, okay, maybe we only run it 20 times, but or God, who knows, maybe even less. But and this could all be proven wrong. But I was so traditionally good against the run. They're set up to be good against the run again. It's just going to be so hard for them to establish it, I think.
And then on the flip side, Iowa State's 3-3-5 defense, obviously a little more of a challenge than what Iowa faced in week one against Illinois State. Um, well, first of all, while we're talking on that side of the ball, kind of the big change this week is with Caleb Bacon, kind of what's the latest on his injury status and what does this mean for this Cyclone defense without somebody that's been a really key leader there?
Yeah, it's a big loss for them, obviously, because Bacon was really emerging as a star. Interestingly, it was his first career start on Saturday. He played a key role as a reserve last season, played a lot of snaps, 6.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. Just really good in all areas and very, very athletic, former walk-on from Lake Mills. He's out for the foreseeable future, I would say. Campbell did say that they got the best possible news they could later Saturday that it might not be season ending. He had surgery. They're just deeming it a lower leg injury. I think most people that saw what happened can connect the dots. But it's a big loss. But Roco Beck, coincidentally, is his teammate, and he told us yesterday he's been texting him, talking to him, and while he's in the hospital to say, "Hey, your leadership is always valuable, but keep being that leader. We need you on the sidelines. We need all this." With the Cyclones also are out one of their most experienced linebackers, Will McLaughlin, who won't be back this week either. So they're going to be mixing, matching a bunch of guys at the second level, and when Iowa's running game looks like maybe it's again, how good is Illinois State? But you got a guy the caliber of Caleb Johnson and others. And if Cade McNamara can be as efficient as he was, obviously, and when was the last time our quarterback threw 3 touchdown passes, let alone 3 and no picks? It's going to be really hard with less experience and less deep linebacking crew. But they like the D line. Didn't look necessarily great against North Dakota. I think part of that was Fitz. Part of that was Bacon being absent. It affected everything, how they rotated. But I think they'll be fine there, and they're really good in the secondary. I just think Iowa's ability to take advantage of inexperience at the second level of that defense could really help them in the short passing game and obviously the running game.
And then kind of first of all, before we get into any score predictions or anything, I always have to ask about special teams. This truly has to be an Iowa podcast. And the special teams question is a mandatory there. Iowa obviously has historically done well with the advantage in special teams. This year, some change with Reese Dakin, not quite at a Tory Taylor level yet. On the Cyclone side, what should we expect to see in terms of special teams?
I don't think we know yet. Um, Redshirt freshman Kyle Conrarty out of Dubuque, senior. I don't want to say he's from Dubuque. Um, they have all the confidence in the world in him, but he hasn't attempted a field goal in college yet. He's made 3 PATs. But he was telling us in the spring and in the fall that he's confident in up to 60 yards out and maybe even 65. So the confidence is there, but the track record is nil. So we'll see. The Cyclones have been good with Jace Gilbert and Keegan Shackford. I think they had touchbacks on each of their kickoffs. And the punter, Tyler Perkins, has been very, very solid for 2 seasons. He's going to continue to do that. But Jace Gilbert, who made his first career field goal in that 2022 win at Kinnick, then struggled and got replaced by a transfer Chase Contreras, who was rock solid last season. He is now the pooch punter for Iowa State. He did well in that regard with a big assist from Darian Porter, special team standout for Iowa State, downing a punt inside about the 3-yard line. and Gilbert also had a touchback. So they're finding ways. Coach Campbell says they don't give up on anybody in this program. So a guy that got buried in the depth chart is finding a way to make an impact. And the return game, Noel, Jalen Jackson, those are your top two guys. Jackson has a couple returning for touchdown at Eastern Michigan, and Noel, when he gets the opportunities, it can be a really, really dangerous punt returner and kick returner. So could be solved in those areas. But hey, even the game Iowa State won in 2022, I've referenced so much, they had two punts blocked. So that's an element of the game Iowa's been really good at. And outside of Darian Porter, Iowa State has not been that good at. So you got to give an Iowa the edge until you see something more from Iowa State. But certainly Iowa State feels like they've got the players in position to be much stronger in that area where they were much stronger last season too.
If there's one kind of overarching key for Iowa State, Iowa State needs to do blank to take back that trophy, what would you say that is?
It's boring and it's kind of true every game, but just don't turn the ball over. Not once. I don't know if they've gone without a turnover, at least one, in since Campbell took over in 2016. There might have been 1 year in there, but I mean, look at Brock Purdy, what he's doing now. His worst college game of his senior season, he threw 3 picks against Iowa State and got benched down the stretch. So that's been critical. Now, the big thing, I keep going to 2022, they turned it over 3 times, but Iowa turned it over 3 times after not turning it over at all for several Cyhawk games. I think they each turned it over once last season. If Iowa State can play completely clean and do what they're capable of in the passing game, and the linebackers don't get too exposed and they can hold their own and finish tackles to prevent big gains and especially third downs where Iowa State was atrocious against North Dakota, they've got a really good chance to win. And even if they do turn it over, if they can force turnovers, which they were pretty good at, particularly interceptions via Jeremiah Cooper, Bo Freeler, and Malik Verdone last year, they can hold their own. But they have to be at worst even in turnover margin, or I just feel like they're home field. Even though Iowa State's had their most success in recent meetings at Kinnick, I think it tips the scales Iowa's way for sure. But that's it. I mean, got to play clean. Iowa's known for it. Iowa State at times is known for it. At times it's a debacle. They've got to be clean, or it's probably going to be a long day, I would say.
Kind of on the flip side for Iowa, I kind of look for the Hawkeyes need to play a consistent full 60 minutes. Saw a really good offensive 30 to 35-ish minutes against Illinois State, but you don't get that same margin for error against Iowa State, especially in this rivalry series, where if they take an entire half to wake up and execute at the level that they're executing at in the second half against Illinois State, it gets to be a much harder path to victory, which then prompts my next question. Do you have a score prediction yet?
I am going to think it's in line with a lot of Cyhawk games where it's going to come down to a field goal. I know Vegas has it pegged that way, which essentially is a home field kind of like bonus. I look, until Iowa State proves it can get it going in the next direction and win consecutive games in this thing, especially at Kinnick, with the again lack of a rushing attack, at least consistently, the being thin at linebacker. I've got Iowa 20-17, but I believe anything is possible in this game for sure.
Okay, this might be the first. I have the exact same score prediction.
Really?
Iowa 20, Iowa State 17. Yeah, that's so if I
That
have
means
to
it's
choose
going
a
to be
different
like
one, I'll
35 to
maybe
3. Somebody wins. That means somebody's going to win 35 to 3. John.
and I think this is gonna be a really good game. Iowa State's a team that I have not put in my AP ballot, but a team that certainly I've considered and has warranted that consideration. So I think this could be a nail biting one. So, we could be kind of paying attention right there to the very end in this one. Not quite like last week where, you kind of knew what was going to happen kind of in both cases toward the end there.
For sure. I mean, that's usually the case in these games. I mean, even last season, Iowa gets up 20-3. Iowa State did have the ball. They didn't get past midfield, but they had a chance offensively to go and tie the game and send it to overtime. And the year before, Iowa gets the late field goal attempt in that swirling rain, and Iowa State wins by 3. So, I mean, I'd be really surprised if it's not a one-score game, but it's happened. So we'll
And
see.
hopefully better weather than 2 years ago when I was at Kinnick. I haven't seen the forecast yet here, so we'll
I'm
have
I'm
to
seeing
see.
fairly cooler temperatures, and I don't think much of a threat, but it's only Wednesday, so anything can change with Iowa weather.
Well, Rob, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, always great to see you, John, and we'll see you up in the press box.
Yes, and thanks to our listeners for tuning in. Until next week, we will talk Hawks later.